All right, we'll get back going here. I stopped that first recording and started a second one. If I remember, I'll put as a part of the title. I will put that it had all the tools, tools overview, settings overview, and floor modeling for the reinforcing. And then this one will cover the walls, and then I will do a third recording with the this one cover walls and slab edges. And we probably should do slab edges first, and then we'll do the walls, and then some more stuff with the constraints, and then I'll stop the recording there, and then the last one will be the section cleanup, reinforcement cleanup, and tagging. All right, so let's look at turn downs or slab edges. So we have, scenario here, right? We'll continue working in this one area. So again, I'm a big fan of isolating these things. So I'll click in one, I'll click on the other, I'll hit HI, and I'm isolating it. I don't want to necessarily fight with everything that I'm seeing when I know I'm just, focusing on one thing. So from here, traditionally, some of you have seen this, we would go rebar and we would do by sketch, and we would just pick this as the host, and then we would draw this out, right? So freeform and a lot of the constraint editing is really kind of change, the way that I started to do these things. So what I do is go to rebar, I'm gonna just do freeform, and I'm gonna do aligned, and I'm gonna pick, this as my host, this as my host, and this as my host. I'm not gonna put rebar here because we don't have a section cutting through there. So if I needed it to, I would go back and do it. But for right now, I just want it across through here. So once I pick my host, right, I know that it's gonna model it perpendicular. So I'm looking to pick this as my path. So once I hit the checkbox, is gonna draw it to that shape. So in here, I can, or wherever really, I can edit my constraints, and I can click on this end constraint here, and I'll just extend it. I did 2 feet, that's a little bit too long. 1 foot 10, beautiful. So I'll do 1 foot 10 on this side. And there's my shape. The beautiful thing about this is, even though it's gonna look like it's not adapting, but it'll adapt. If I change this to an 18, and then I come back and change this to an 18 to match, I don't have any cleanup. I mean, I might have some cleanup with my annotation, but rebar modeling wise, it adapts. So I think this is, definitely my preference, and you guys just saw my hook adapt there too. So everything can change to a certain extent. This is not like, if you completely change something, don't expect the behavior just to be magical. But you guys have been in a scenario where the trench gets deeper, this has to get lower, and and whatnot. Does that make sense? And I would essentially do the same thing, even though I don't have to. I just find it really simple, just to do it here. So I would, if I wanted to do it in the other direction, I just pick that, right? But if I wanted to go up and over for whatever reason, I can. And then I just find this, really easy to change, to manipulate. And then now I have my dots. I find this easier than having to put the bars, extending them to where they need to be, moving them, etc., of just doing it with a freeform. But there's nothing wrong in this particular scenario, because we're not looking to really get the shape on the other end, simply because we don't have a section cut through there. So if you did, whether it's maximum spacing or or fixed number. Let's just say you didn't want any cleanup. You just wanted to show your 3, and you do your perpendicular to cover, and then you can place them, and then you can edit the constraints for the behavior, and then whatever it is that you're looking for to do. But to me, this takes more time than the other way. Does that make sense?
Hey, Raphael, is there a way to bend the bars up at the top to run parallel? Or those
You
up at
talking
the
about
top?
these?
No, up at the very top where they go up on an angle, but then they just never kind of align with the rebar running up the slope.
Hold on. Start over with your question again.
So you see where they run up the slope right into the floor reinforcing, and then up at the top. I get comments that those need to be bent to run parallel with that top reinforcing.
You're talking about
No, the turn down, the thickened slab. Yeah.
Oh, to hook that way?
Yeah.
I historically haven't seen that. I don't know what you get about creating another splice and another bend in that bar. Maybe somebody here can chime in. Parker, have you?
I've gotten that too, Raphael, to where there needs to be a horizontal, or in this case, a sloped hook at the end of that.
I guess that's really design preference. I guess I don't know. I've done a million of these where they don't hook them, and I've seen it rarely where they do it. I don't know what you fully gain by further developing that bar into the slab. Maybe there's some scenarios. Maybe this. I don't know. I don't know if one of the
it's more
engineers here can chime in.
preference.
Yeah. But if you needed to do that, in theory, I haven't done this. You could select this as the host, but it's going to get a little tricky there. So if you had a scenario like that, then you may look into, potentially one or two routes. You can draw it in with Sketch and then make sure you properly constrain everything so it still somewhat adapts. You can also, in theory, let's just say I'm going to bring this down. So now I'm looking to bring it here, right? So that I mean it would be tied to the bar, but I'm going to bring it here from exaggeration purposes. So somewhere, maybe there, right? And then maybe I'm looking to do that same rebar hook. Oh, wrong way. Yeah. I don't know how you would do that with this unless it lets you pick the surface. So let's try it. So if we were to do, so I'm just going to pick my floors. Come on. Okay. For some reason, my shortcut's not working. All right. So if we were to, oh, my slab edge is in there, I would floors and slab edges. There we go. That's probably why I didn't want to work. It knew I needed the slab edges. So in theory, right, if we go and select this as a surface, this as a surface, and potentially this as a surface, and this as a surface, and this as a surface, I haven't pushed it to this limit, so let's see what it does. And let's do maximum spacing to make sure that we get what we need here. And then the path is going to be here, right? No, I didn't like it. Maybe if this was flat, it might work. But it did bring it up to the cover, which saves you a step. Right? So in this scenario, it would save you a step. So I learned at least that. I would say the vast majority of the engineers that I work with, this is their preference. So if you do have where they want to splice that bar, I don't know of a different way other than doing it by Sketch. that I can think of. Anybody else can think of another method there?
Are you able to make another hook connection that will do like a 45-ish?
I mean, you can try.
I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, this is because here's the thing is once you go down this path, you're at the mercy of the geometry that it creates based on the surfaces that you select.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not creating this shape, the software is. So the only things that you can change are through here. And if I look at what my options are for the hooks, is it's going to be 90, 180, 135s. But we're not gonna manipulate these. I mean, these are
No.
our standard sizes. So the only one that we can argue to manipulate is this rebar hook 90, and you just saw that it went in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, you know, try and keep seeing what you can come up with, and we can, you know, combine our powers to try to come up with something. But off the top of my head, I can't think of how this would adapt to that other than what I just tried there and it didn't work.
Okay.
Again, I don't know everything. I'll be the first to admit it. But doing it by sketch, I know works. And with the sketch, you can still constrain things, you know, to make it at least somewhat adaptable, you know. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. So now the video recordings are a lie. Oh no, this is technically still slab edges. So never mind. We're good. Does that make sense for slab edges? It's the same thing, you know, for this scenario. It's just depending on, it's just picking the surfaces. It's just going to adapt to whatever geometry you tell it to. All right. Moving on to walls. So the walls, oftentimes I'm doing them from a section perspective while I'm looking at the 3D. So let's go back to this first one and let's go to this section A. So I'm looking to be the section A. So I'm gonna put in some detail components, let's just say with a keyway and water stop, just so that we can kind of look at a typical scenario of what. One day I want to make this line based instead of how I originally made it. I wish I would have known a little bit more when I first created this family, and I just never have gotten around to it, fixing it. I also need to add the flip commands to it. But for right now, I'm just gonna copy them. Okay, so we got keyways and water stops. We'll pretend this whole thing is underground for whatever reason with a door. Maybe I'll take this one back because that's a little too silly. All right, I don't want to see that hidden line, so I'm just gonna bring this back. There we go. I just changed my far clip offset. I don't want to see the hidden line for the thing beyond versus doing other things, just to keep it simple. Okay, so when I'm doing my wall reinforcing, right, I'm looking in 3D to see what I have in my wall, right? So before I even put any rebar in, I'm going to go see, do I have any openings? Do I have any this, that, the other? Is it stepping? Is it doing, what is it? How many sections do I have? Is it just one? Is it two? Is it three throughout this particular wall, right? So we'll go with the simplest of scenarios, right? There is no openings. There's nothing going on this wall. It's not stepping. It's not sloping. It's as straightforward as we get with a wall. Okay, so I'm gonna go And some of you might do this a little bit different than I do, but this is kind of what I typically do. So I'm just going to go rebar, and I'm going to keep my rebar shape 0. I'm going to leave it as expanded to expand to host, and we'll look at that by 2 points when we do the dowels and some splices. In theory, you could still do freeform rebar. You could, in theory, do area reinforcement. I'm not a big fan of area reinforcement in walls. I know some of you will do it. You lose some of the things that we have to do in terms of the extent of the reinforcing. But I was pondering a little bit more about this morning, so we might try a little bit with it just to see if we can get it to be a little bit more effective. But I also don't like over modeling reinforcing, because it is more data you're inputting into your model. Okay, so here we're going to go and do maximum spacing. We're not. I'm going to put in my vertical bars first. So I typically just model 3 at whatever spacing I need and whatever size I need. Okay, so I'm coming here and I'm going to put it up against the cover. I say you feel, but you don't really feel anything, but you'll notice that, like, if you're in the middle, it's just kind of moving, and then there's a point where it snaps, and that's where you want to place it. And what I do is I build half of my wall reinforcing. The more I can copy, mirror, etc., that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to just build every single thing over and over. Now, again, I remember I told you guys, yeah, I'm kind of doing everything with constraints. So I'm going to edit my constraints. I'm going to tell it what behavior I want from, oops, that's going to be positive, right? What behavior I want from a standpoint of my constraints. And I want to choose the things that I want it that I wanted to interact with, so that maybe that might be more realistic. And I want to create a document to give some kind of guidelines on this. I mean, we do have a structural SOP that shows some stuff, but it's a little outdated based on how it used to show up with CAD. So as you notice, it's going to put 3 bars in where my section's cut, right? Because we told it that it's going to be on the current work plane, and that work plane is where we cut the section. Right, so it's just going to put three bars, 3 vertical bars. Now my horizontals, alternatively, I'll do them as maximum spacing. The reason being is because it gives me more flexibility on which dots I want to pick in any particular section, and then I can just copy my my verticals to wherever I need them to be if I have additional sections down the wall, or I may add more depending on how close those section cuts are. So what I mean by that is, like, okay, so I'm going to put my rebar, I'm going to do perpendicular to cover, and I'm going to do maximum spacing. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just drop it in place, because I'm just going to move it based on constraints. That way I know it's going to behave exactly how I need it to behave. So I'm going to edit my constraints. I'm going to pick this bar and I'm going to actually constrain it to my rebar. And you'll notice that it creates this toggle that is relating those two together. And the advantage of that is, and let's finish constraining. So my top, I'm going to constrain it to my top of my bar, and I'm going to bring it down maybe like 1/2 inch, just so that the bar diameter isn't sticking up above the end of the line there. And I'm going to do the same thing here, right? Oops. Need to change my constraints first. I'm going to do the same thing here, right? So what that does now is that when I move this bar, it moves my dots with it. If I move this one, I need to create the 2-way street. If I could, I knew I was forgetting something. There's 1-way street, 2-way street. Does that make sense? So right now, these are connected to this. If I do this, they're connected to each other. And if I move one, the other one moves. If I move this one, the other one moves. So they're completely constrained together. Does that make sense? And I just realized that my vertical bar, I actually want it to be like there. And this one, I want it to be off of here. Oops, positive. I want my my vertical bars to splice into my my top slab here. So this is actually how I want to constrain it. I got too hyper focused. So once I know how I want this, I'm still like, well, now we need to put the dowel in. Any questions on putting in this vertical bar and this horizontal bar and the horizontals? Again, the entire time I'm looking at 3D, I'm doing this with my Windows style. I'm never here. That's what I get. Right? I'm always working, looking at my 3D of what I'm putting in so I can understand, because this is a 3D, element. And it is going to go, when I put it expanded to host, it's going to go from cover to cover. So if I have a wall opening on this wall, I do not want my rebar going through that opening. Why? Because when you cut a section through here, everybody's like, well, why is my rebar there? I have an opening there, and all my rebar's going through. It's because it's modeled that way. So what we want to do is take this and say, okay, well, I'm going to edit the constraints. I'm going to edit at the end of this, and I'm going to, oops, I'm going to pick that opening, right? And now I'm going to tell it it's at that opening. So if that opening moves, so does your rebar, right? So if I move that opening, your rebar is adapting. That's what you want. If you don't set up these constraints, if I just let's say I left it here and it was here originally, right? And if I just do this, and I think it's automatically readapting. It already know that I did it. But if your constraints weren't defined per this opening, per where you need it to stop, if anything changes, it's not going to adapt. And you're gonna have to go and manually change it, manually change it, manually change it. Now, if this opening goes away, then yeah, there I might, if I even care that I don't have rebar here, I'll come back and redefine it to there, right? If I had a section here. If I didn't have a section here, it doesn't matter, because it's not going to negatively impact me in any way, shape, or form. You guys with me so far? So these are all little tiny extra steps from then just placing the rebar and tagging it, that if you have something really, really simple, do you absolutely need to go overly constrain everything? Maybe, maybe not. But what this is going to allow you to do is it's going to give you so many less headaches as things are changing post you modeling reinforcing. And it's also going to create the cleanup way easier, because you're not dealing with rebar that shouldn't be in a particular location. And we'll talk about the things beyond when we get to the rebar cleanup. So now I want to put in my dowel. So I'm going to go rebar here. You could do expand by host and put it in parallel to work plane. I'm going to do fixed number and spacing. I'm going to do three bars, same as my vertical bars. You could go put in here and then adapt the changes, the size of the dowel, or you can do by 2 points. And by 2 points, it's just drawing it out. So I can start here somewhere, doesn't really matter, right? And I know that my my splice is going to be 1'11", right? And that bar is right here. So maybe I just move it out some, right? Then from here, I'm going to edit the constraints. So I'm coming to this. I'm going to do, I think that's -7/8, right? Now, oh, sorry, that's not here nor there. So usually what we do is we space these bars about 1.5 inches apart. Now you have about a 7 1/8 of an inch, sometimes 2 inches. So you can place it about there. This is a 12-inch wall at a 3/8 scale. So I'm going to be a little bit more conservative because you'll see what I have to do here in a second. Now I will take this constraint and I'll assign it to here. It's already the length that I need to do to be, because I know the standard splice for number 6 bar is 23 inches, right? So I'm gonna reconstrain it here, because what that's gonna do is if this slab moves up or down, that splice is gonna maintain that same length. At the bottom, I'm gonna come in and do, based on the cover, and I might bump it up about 4 inches, maybe 3 in this scenario, right? And I'm gonna hit check mark, finish, and then here is I'm gonna put my standard splice. Okay. Now, once I have this how I want it, which I don't, still have one more. So here's before, what we would do is we would model the rebar and we would stop it here. And then we would model 2 dots here, because we want, this bar is directly tied to this bar, which ties to the other one. So the order of those bars are vertical, dowel, and then the dot, because we're exaggerating it. So we want the dot outside of the dowel. So we can use edit bars. So we can take this and we can move it over to move it over 1.5 inches. And then I want to move it up a little bit so that it's off the keyway, right? So there's my exaggeration. But I can move that one bar independent of the rest of the mat, which we weren't able to do in previous years. So there's no need to model these separately anymore. So once you have that, you finish. Once you have everything exactly how you want it, I just take it and I mirror it. Now here is, so the only thing that I have to come here and fix is my dowel. So I'll usually just raise this another 2 inches. Whether that's, crossing, or if you're at the edge, moving them both in the same direction. All of this is exaggerated for the purpose of being able to visualize the design between one to the other. All right. So once we have this exactly how we want, here's the thing. At least in 2020, and I haven't fully tested. Well, actually, I'm lying. I did this in 2022, right? Like, you have to kind of reestablish some of these constraints that aren't automatic. So if I wanted to, like, these two are, because they were mirrored together, they maintain their constraints. So you see, they still have that two-way constraint. But I may have to, I have to reestablish the constraint for my splice. And I'll have to go here and then all the definition is, all the definition is the same. It's how you want it to behave, but the main ones are, you want to make sure you reconstrain that to there. Now, I will put that with a caveat, right? If you have a complex structure, you have a lot of walls, you have a lot of sections, I think it's absolutely worth the time to reestablish that constraint. Why? Because as things change and you got to make your way through 14 sheets of sections to find every single location that your splice is no longer showing accurately, right? That's very time consuming. And if you created these constraints, then you can print a PDF and do the eyeball test, right? You can go through and just looking real fast, not to the point where you have to know you're catching every single one. So if you have a very simple structure with one section, is it worth the extra time? You can argue it's not, right? But if you do have more of a complex structure, you have a lot of sections, I would say take the time, reestablish those constraints. If this is the one section, when it changes, you're going to see it, then, not a huge deal. Once I have this, I can take and I'm going to just take my rebar and then I'm going to copy it. Again, some of you would have to reestablish some of those constraints. It's just not, it doesn't adapt, right? That one stays because the floor is still the same. But had I copied it to a location that wasn't in that same floor, like let's say I had a step floor and I'm copying it, then it won't do it. And let's say a scenario where that I like to do, I'm going to change this to finish face exterior so that my wall grows in real quick. So let's say I have an 18-inch wall and on this side I have a 12-inch wall. You're like, well, I can't copy that because it's not the exact same wall. It doesn't matter. I can just copy one face and then I can mirror it. And then I can come in here on a 0.7 finish. And there you have it, right? Now it gets even more than that, right? If I know that I'm cutting another section through the wall right here, what I like to do, and it doesn't matter which view you do it in, but if you're in a view or if you want to select it from 3D, you can come in here, right? And your bars are here and your other section cut is somewhere in this general vicinity. I can copy rotate. And I'm going to place that rotation. And whether I'm doing both or just one, a lot of times your success rate is going to be better if you just do one face. But for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to come here and I'm going to rotate this here, right? And now I put those same vertical bars in this particular location. So if I come into here and I go to my section, there's my bars. Now, if for some reason there's a misalignment there, that's why I say you'll have better success rate. I might have, it's because I have an 18-inch wall, so the center point that I rotated is not the same. But again, that's why I think it's easier just to do one face of the wall and then mirror it, because you are likely going to have different scenarios. But this is, let's say, this is, sorry. I really messed with this one, right? So the current component has no constraints. Yes, I understand. That's why I'm trying to constrain you. I've never seen it do that. Let me cut it and paste it in place to see if it just got lost with the host. You can apply a new constraint by selecting a valid target. Okay. Sorry guys, bear with me. Of course, things go wrong whenever. I mean, I do this on a I don't want to say daily basis. I don't do rebar every day, but I do this quite often. It's usually it's when it doesn't behave that way, it's because it's not picking on the host. That's really weird. Let me try that again. All right, so oops, too many locations. You can also come to this plan, right? And you can pick your rebar, and you can make sure that you selected what you wanted to. I have no idea. I must have had the wrong surface picked when I did the dowels, because it should have been there. That's really odd. So I'm gonna just pick my outside one, and I'm gonna rotate this. Do I want to rotate off of here? That's going to end up outside. I want the inside ones. There we go. Don't want you. Rotate, copy, place that rotation. And I'm going to bring that back. You found the host. Why is it doing that? I'm sorry, guys. This is really bizarre. I didn't even put
something that
dowels
works. I found something that worked for me one day, but I don't know if there's any repercussions to it or not. Like I did the rebar in one wall, and I did a mirror in the corner and used a 45-degree axis point, and it flipped my stuff over too.
Okay. I haven't done it that way, but I've done this a bunch of times, and I never really thought of the mirror. I don't know why it's giving me this behavior. I've done this so many times. It's really bizarre because I'll usually just go here. I usually pick one side. I don't usually pick both sides. I'm not gonna lie on that part. And I will usually, and I'll try what you just said, Mike, too, in just a second. Now I'm just a man on a mission. 90 degrees. Go back to section B. Yeah, there you go. Now it works. I don't know what one. I don't know what went wrong, but now the constraints are there. Because this is the same floor, there should be the same constraint because that's the same floor. The constraint copies. As long as you're, but you know, a lot of times we're doing different floors, whatever. I have no idea why it wasn't working before. I probably do that 15 more times and not get that same result. But anyways, once you have that, you can mirror, copy, do whatever you need to do, and then model your horizontals. So what Mike is saying too, oh, also, let's just say that based on the rotation, let's say it ended up, that rebar ended up over here, right? And your section B doesn't pick it up, right? This is what I want. Like, if you can get something out of this, is the understanding that you're modeling an actual 3D element, and not to think about it as just lines and dots on a section, because you'll do this and you come here and it's like it's not there. How do I get it there? Or it doesn't work. No, it's just not where your section cut plane is. So you want to move it. And what I'm doing is I'm holding shift and using my arrows because that way I know it's moving perfectly straight. You can also use the move command. I would not drag. If you drag, you run the risk of taking it off its position. So then now when you go here, now it's there, right? I don't want to copy it here because it's not there, but maybe I want to copy, this bar here and then edit my constraints so that that's there, right? So the concept is you don't have to. I don't want people to think that you're modeling rebar in one place and then another place and then another place and then another place, and you're just constantly doing the same exact functions. Copy, paste, mirror, rotate, whatever you need to do to minimize redoing the exact same thing. And if this is a different size than this one, copy it and then change the size. That's what the colors are for. It's like, oh shoot, this is supposed to be a number 8 bar, right? You'll see that it's a different color. Maybe that's not your favorite color for that. And you're like, that doesn't look all that great in what I'm looking at. So maybe a number 8, maybe I want it to be pink. Now it's pink. Whatever you want it to be. And let's say, oh, I don't really like this 20% transparency. It makes it a little too opaque. Well, maybe you want 30. I don't know how much of a difference that 30 made, but you get what I'm saying. Like you change it to what you want it to be. And if it's something that's like, hey, it's not just me. I just can't see this yellow. No one can see this yellow. Okay, well, let's take the yellow out. All right, so let's going back to that section A. All right, so what Mike was saying. So Mike was saying we could take this rebar. Let's just take one mat here, and we can do mirror drawing on axes, and then we could do this at a 45-degree angle, and that does it as well. Let's move this over here real quick and cut my section right here, just so I can isolate it from there, right? I must have selected one from each face. I'm not working as diligent as I need to try to get through this, but it kept all of its constraints. Beautiful. I might actually start doing that instead of the rotate copy. I don't know why I never thought of that, but thanks, Mike. That's helpful. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
What's up?
For the wall down at the water stop, how did you separate that bottom rebar dot from the rest of the group to get it to be offset?
I use the edit bars tool. So I'm gonna reset it, right? So I reset it. So I click on my mat, I hit edit bars, I click the bar that I want to modify. I can use the move command, and I know I need to move it 1.5 inches because that's how far the other dot is. And then I moved it up 0.5 inch from its original location. Alternatively, I could have changed the cover to be 2 inches up, but and then that way I can put it where I need it to be.
And those rebar dots coming in and out of the page, those are the only ones where you were using the maximum with spacing, right?
Yeah, the
The
reason
other
I
ones
use
were
the
just
the
three,
reason
just
I
to
use
keep it clean.
the reason I use maximum spacing on those is just so that when we're cleaning up, and for, this is a really simple one, but let's just say, I do my first and last and I do my rebar selection. Like, I have the versatility to pick it here versus picking it here versus picking the third one here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
well,
I
the call
have,
out, you've got to have something for the
exactly.
call
So,
out to say maximum spacing.
but let's say you have a whole bunch of annotation here, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing that, but then you have another section right here where you don't have a whole lot of annotation here, but you do here. So you need the flexibility to be able to um, to pick, like, if I'm like, I want to see this one, right? And that's the one. Oops. This is the one that I want to have my tripod through, right?
Mhm.
But I have another section right here. And let's say I copy my reinforcing, right? So I have another section right here, but this is a partial section. I want the flexibility to be able to select this bar, and this bar, because now it's different needs. But if you don't do it with maximum spacing, then you're having to model all these bars, and that's when it starts becoming a mess. But you're like, I don't want to see this rebar here. I want to see that rebar here. We're interacting with the same mat. I'm able to select what I want to see differently. But with the vertical bars, like, if I had another section that's that close, I could, like, if I have 3 sections across this wall, and I could, do, maximum spacing, and then I can edit the constraints. Current rebar has no constraints. How did you lose your constraints? I guess because it just got placed in La La Land. Let me see if it lets me pick a constraint. Yeah, there we go. So if oops, I'm in edit bars, not constraints. Here, constraints. Pick this, pick this. Yes, I know you don't have any constraints. There we go. Oops, I see what's happening. That's my bad, guys. I undid. I hit canceled out, and that's why I need to do maximum spacing. That's my fault. All right, so now I can edit my constraints. It's telling me I don't have a constraint, and this is how it should have reacted, right? Now I'm telling it here. Okay, let's just say now I want it from here, and this side doesn't have a constraint, so I'm established one. I don't want it to establish. I want to establish there, and let's say -2. So now I have all that rebar there, right? All those verticals there. If I know I'm going to have multiple sections, but if I'm only going to have one section, then I might just do that. Or if I have one section all the way over here and another one over there, then I'm going to copy. So I don't have to create all that reinforcing, all that data into my model if I don't need it. Does that make sense, Shane? Does that make sense, Shane?
Yeah, that's good.
You could also, like, you could do number with spacing. You could keep adding until you get there, right? If your sections are nearby. Any questions so far with that?
I do have a question about Okay. When you're on the top, when you're on the plan view for that small building, it's not entirely related to rebar. The way it's graphically showing up, if you zoom in, it's my yeah, the bars look like they're a little bit more, they look kind of different in how they're drawn out. Like it looks like it shows the whole bar instead of just the
Yeah,
line
so that's
representing.
your
Yeah.
detail level. So if I change this to coarse, it's going to be single lines.
Sorry, that was a dumb question. Okay, thank you.
That's not a dumb question. That is there. If you don't ask, you won't know, right? So the detail level of reinforcing changes like many elements, right? Depending on what you do, so what you get out of it. That's why in our view templates, if you go to the structural rebar, we force it to coarse because we're showing at a fine detail level, but so we don't want to see, we want to see single line work for the rebar, so that's why we force it to coarse.
Yeah, when I've been doing some projects, when I see the bar kind of detailed in that way, well, and it's not, and it's on the level it should be set at, I just assume it usually means something's gone wrong. So I just thought that I did it wrong in this case, but I see it now. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions with the reinforcing in wall, slab edges, or anything that we've covered? Okay, I'm gonna stop this recording here.